Guys, there's a time that my wife Christine and I asked God to give us a child. Unfortunately, God betrayed us. He gave us a sick child. He gave us a disabled child. And that was not part of the request that we had given to Him. So this is our sad story. So I remember very well when our daughter Amy was born. She was diagnosed by severe autism as well as cerebral palsy. Our daughter Amy was very dependent. She was always in pain, and it was a very challenging endeavor for my wife and I to really raise a kid who was disabled and dependent. This was because we were not so much or so well financially endowed, you understand? And therefore, we really knew that raising such a disabled kid was going to take a toll on our young lives as well as take a toll on our young marriage. But as much as we were bitter with God for giving us a kid who was sick, we accepted, right? Because then it's God who gives children. It's God who blesses the wombs of our wives, and therefore all honor and glory goes back to Him. And therefore, my people, the tedious effort of raising our daughter Amy began, and trust me, it was not as easy as one would want it to be. You see, my wife and I kept on fighting. There was a lot of worry in the house. There was a lot of anxiety in the house. There was a lot of tension. This is because at some point we were not able to, raise the medical bills that were needed to, keep Amy going. Sometimes raising the food or the supplements or the nutritional concepts that our sick child needed was really difficult for us. So in a home where you're raising a disabled kid as well as low finances or low income, there's always endless fights and endless anxiety. But we kept going, we kept pushing, we kept hoping beyond all hopes that because this child came from God, it's God who gave her to us, God was going to help us navigate through that particular situation. And that's what, my people, was our prayer every evening. For those of you who have ever raised sick children, especially those who suffer from autism or palsy, cerebral palsy, you know how the amount of pain that our kids go through. They are always crying, they always beat their tongues without knowing, and therefore blood is always coming out of their mouths. For those who are autistic, they always need diapers, and they are always on lifetime daily medication. And for us, truly, that was very difficult on our end. Instead of going to hustle every day, we had to stay by Amy's side so that, she would not bite her tongue, she would not, convulse and fall off. We had to be around her. To be honest, my good people, we asked God a lot of questions, and I really hate to admit, but it reached a point in our family life that our disabled daughter Amy became a burden to us. And therefore, with all that, dilapidated finances, with all those fights with my wife, with all those misery as a family, we knew too well that it would not go beyond this. And therefore, my good people, we did the unthinkable. My wife and I decided to do the unthinkable. We decided to abandon our sick daughter Amy at children's home somewhere around Thika town. It was a very difficult decision to make, my good people. It was a decision that by and large we knew too well that God was not going to forgive us. Nature was not going to pardon us, and Whoever would have heard that would have done such a thing. But all these people did not know the kind of struggle that we were going through as a family. They did not know that ever since our daughter was born, happiness became something so luxurious for us to afford as a family. And therefore, we decided that we were going to, abandon her at a children's home, and hopefully, and by God's own grace, somebody was going to pick her, and she was going to be raised by that particular children's home and be given that particular life that she deserved, that care, because then the government had the resources to take care of these sick children that us, we did not. Also, we thought at that particular point. So my good people, that day came, we hired a car. I remember it was late into the night at around 10 p.m. So the plan was we would, take Amy with us. We would drive to Thika Town. We had actually identified that particular children's home where we were supposed to, abandon Amy at. So we were going to basically go behind the fence of that particular children's home, and then we would put her just right next to the rear gate of that home. And then definitely, because of the cold at night, she would begin to cry, and then the soldiers around there, would pick her up. After hearing her cry, they would take her in, and the facility had enough resources to take care of our baby Amy, and therefore that was the plan, and that is how we executed it. And we pray that one day, in the fullness of time, we would reunite with Amy, that if God had planned it that way. So my good people, that is what my wife Christine and I did to our child Amy. So surprisingly, things did not get better after we abandoned Amy and came back to our home. The fights continued, the misunderstanding continued. There was again a lot of anxiety as well. There was a massive communication breakdown in our home. I think the guilt of abandoning our kid or selling off our kid to a children's home was never going to leave us anytime soon, my good people. And therefore, things became even tougher back at my place. We 2 years in, my wife lost interest in a lot of things. She lost interest in romance. We were not able to communicate in terms of romance and make love and everything. She became so depressed, empty, and completely dry. I tried everything, the therapies, the monies I would get a little bit, would rush to therapy, but nothing was working. Could be that God was real, punishing us for that selfish act of, selling off our kid. We didn't know what was going on. Now, again, sadly, after 3 years, again, we could not have another child in our home. And I think this is what completely messed up everything. We tried. We even went to our family doctor and, explained to him. We've tried, getting another baby. The doctor was like, hey, Christine is so okay. We wonder why she's not able to conceive. When we went back to the home, the depression continued on her end. And as a man, I also got tired. I got tired, and at some point I felt I started missing my girl Amy, my daughter Amy. I felt that after 4 years and nothing better is coming off the marriage, and one of us is out there, the guilt, the trauma, the disappointment, the breakdown in communication. My heart grew tired as a man, and for the very first time, I wanted out of that marriage because there was no incentive to continue being with my wife, because then again happiness was not our portion. And therefore because of the irreconcilable differences that were there, and our inability to have a second kid, and blah blah blah, we decided to call it quits. We decided to, everyone to go their own way, because everything had crumbled down. Our attempts to talk to our pastors and everything could not work at that particular point. So I remember the day of our separation. It was quite painful for me, because then I had sold off or abandoned my disabled kid in a home somewhere, and now the only wife I've known for close to 7 years is leaving me, and everything that I've ever worked for as a man was going to the trenches. Truly, my people, it's a situation that I would not wish for even the worst of my enemies. But it is what it is. Shit happens, and then we really have to move on. So I questioned God, asked God a lot of things, but then God doesn't directly answer on some of the inquiries you make. So I said, Sawa, it's okay, let everybody go their way. One day everything that has happened in my life would make sense. So that evening, I remember I called an ex-girlfriend of mine who was living in Kitengela. I called her and I told her that, hey, I want to see you. I want somebody to talk to. I've gone through a lot of things. My family has broken down. I just need someone to talk to. And make no mistake, my good people, I was going to this ex-girlfriend of mine not to renew what we had, but to seek a shoulder to lean on, for the sense that this lady was already married. She was having 2 kids and she was having a home. And in the position or situation that I was in at that particular point, I needed somebody to talk to. So I hopped into a matatu and I went all the way to Kitengela. It was around 8 in the evening. I was gonna spend like an hour or so with the family, catch up with them. Then I would, go back to a place I had newly, rented in, after the separation with my wife, Christy. So at around 8, I got to where my ex was living. She welcomed me. She knew prior to the visit that I was coming. She had told her family as well. She had told her husband that I would be visiting. They had no problem. She just wanted to listen to my story, what I've gone through, and perhaps give me a newer, or a better way, or a newer way to look at life through a new lens, a lens of self-forgiveness, a sense of redirection, and a sense of reassurance that, better days are ahead. Actually, that is what I was seeking as a person. So I got there. They were so excited to, for my visit. Dinner was served at around 8:45, and when we were partaking our dinner, and we had all gathered around that particular, dining table, she told me that, Socrates, I want you to meet the 5th member of our family. We adopted a young girl 4 years ago, and I would like you to meet her. It's at that particular point, my good people, that a young girl was wheeled into the dining area. And when I looked at that girl looked so familiar. And yes, my good people, your guess is as good as mine. That young girl who was being wheeled to where we were eating was my own disabled daughter, Amy, who my wife and I had abandoned 4 years ago at a home, a children's home in Thika. When I looked at her, and tears forming down in my eyes, and remembering everything that had happened, and now this new family had adopted her, they had taken care of her, she had grown, she was so beautiful, she was so good looking, she had been taken care of, and at that particular point, everything came on crashing on me, on the memories of the time we had with my daughter Amy, and how we had been disappointed at God for giving us a disabled child.